socialize with him there. And it wasn't just me, it was me, Jeff Shams, who I worked with. So the attorneys were invited. But other than that, no, I've never was invited to a dinner. I never was invited to a show. I never invited to a movie or anything with him. No.
And I want to return back to the statement that you provided for Epstein's defense. Is it true that you made Mr. Epstein a godfather of your children?
Yes, it was an honorary appellation. I had no expectation because I didn't have that kind of relationship with him, but I wanted to show gratitude, do something to show gratitude for how he helped my wife and I have our children. And so I had asked him, would it be okay? And he wouldn't have any obligation to do anything, but it's a way of honoring him if I could make him honorary godfather. And I did.
Sorry. Based on your testimony, your children did not have any relationship with Mr. Epstein.
No. I think in total they met him twice in the office, and they were very, very young at the time. My wife was there. They were in the office. I think it was 2 times.
Would you have entrusted Mr. Epstein to care for your children?
To care for my children? No, I wouldn't have trusted anybody to care for my children.
Who is Ghislaine Maxwell?
Ghislaine Maxwell was an associate of Jeffrey Epstein.
When did you first meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
Sometime after I started working representing Epstein in 1996.
What did you understand her relationship to be with Mr. Epstein?
My understanding in it, at the time, my understanding was that she was largely kind of an overall household manager. Epstein even then would travel from different households, and Ghislaine was responsible for making sure that the households were managed properly, that they were supplied properly, that the employees there were doing the cleaning and things like that. That was my understanding of her role. I learned at some point that she had been a girlfriend of his, though I do not believe at the time that I was there that she was a girlfriend of his.
And you mentioned that she would manage Mr. Epstein's properties. Did you ever understand her to have any role in arranging or scheduling masseuses for Mr. Epstein?
No.
She never talked to you about paying masseuses?
No.
How often did you interact with Ghislaine Maxwell?
When I worked in the office in New York City on Madison Avenue, she had an office there, so she appeared from time to time. She wasn't in my section of the office, but she was there, so I would see her. I would say hello, that kind of thing. And it wasn't super frequent, but I saw her. I saw her there.
As far as your day-to-day and the legal services you were providing, did you have any interactions with her?
At times I did. Again, most of my stuff was very specific. It was transactional. So there were times, I believe, Maxwell purchased a townhouse. So I did work for that townhouse, the purchase of that townhouse. I believe she had me look at an agreement or two. I can't recall which agreements off the top of my head, but I believe she had me look at agreements or two. And sometimes she would convey requests by Epstein for me to do some kind of a transactional or corporate work for that.
And you mentioned the acquisition of the property. This past week we had Mr. Khan testify, and he said that there were accounting work that he did for Ms. Maxwell, and she, I don't want to mischaracterize his testimony, but said effectively that she didn't pay. Did she pay you for the work that you did for her?
No, it was done, to the extent I did work for her, it was at the authorization of Epstein.
Would you consider Ghislaine Maxwell at any point to be a friend of yours?
No,
Do you believe that Maxwell facilitated Epstein's access to minor victims?
I don't know.
Mr. Indyke, I want the record to be clear, so I'm going to ask you some questions related to the investigation of Mr. Epstein in 2005. When did you first become aware that there was an investigation into Mr. Epstein's conduct in Southern Florida?
I'm not entirely certain. I believe it was 2006, 2007.
And for the record, you did not have any knowledge of the illegal activity by Mr. Epstein prior to his arrest.
I'd worked for him for a decade and I had no knowledge of anything, any allegations being made against him like that.
On October 20th of 2005, police executed a search warrant for Mr. Epstein's Palm Beach, Florida home. Do you recall this occurring?
Can you tell me the date again?
October 20th, 2005.
I don't think I knew contemporaneously.
Palm Beach detective Joseph Riccieri spoke out about his belief that Epstein was tipped off about the raid since multiple computers expected to be at his house were missing when the search warrant was executed. To your knowledge, did anyone tip off Jeffrey Epstein to the October 20th search warrant in Palm Beach?
I don't know.
When you visited Mr. Epstein's properties, did you notice cameras?
Can you specify which property?
Well, you mentioned the Manhattan property at one point.
Sure. So let's break it down. The Manhattan property. My understanding about the cameras, there were cameras in the Manhattan property. My understanding is that they were external cameras. There was a security room when you first walked in to the right that had monitors of the external cameras that were all around the perimeter, the outside of his townhouse. I later found out, and by later I mean, I think, after things start to get conflated, but I think I found this out after he got arrested the second time, that there was one camera, and this is probably even after he died, that was one camera. He had a safe room in the house. I didn't even know there was a safe room in the house, but he had a safe room in the house. And there was a camera outside the safe room in the house. Those are the cameras that I knew about in New York. In Florida, there was much made about, and I think it was in the press. Again, a lot has gone on and lots of reports have come out since then. But I believe in Florida, there was a reference to cameras in his house, but there were cameras, as I understand it, that the police helped put in there because there was concern that somebody was stealing from him. So they put the cameras, I think, in his desk on the ground floor, and I wasn't sure if there was maybe one in the garage as well. But those are the cameras that I knew about.
There have been allegations that Mr. Epstein would record visits at various properties. You don't know anything about that?
I've heard the allegations. I know of no recordings. I don't know of cameras that would have done that.
Mr. Indyke, excuse me.
Yes.
The majority has about 5 minutes, and I just want to make sure the record is clear, and I'm going to ask you numerous yes or no questions. First, this is not a yes or no question. How did Mr. Epstein act towards the young women or girls that he surrounded himself with?
The question assumes that I saw him surround himself with young women or girls. It's not true.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein engage in sexual conduct?
I never witnessed Mr. Epstein engage in sexual conduct.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein have sexual conduct of any kind with young women or girls?
I never witnessed Mr. Epstein have any sexual conduct, period.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein sexually abuse or assault young women or girls?
I never witnessed that, no.
Did Mr. Epstein ever discuss sexual acts of any kind with you?
No.
Was it common for Mr. Epstein or Miss Maxwell to bring young women or girls to any other place where the two of you would meet?
The only women that were ever in my presence, to my recollection, with one exception, I'll get to that in a second, were women who were either in their 20s or in their 30s, who were assistants, who I understood to be personal assistants of Epstein.
You said you had an exception.
I'm sorry, and the exception is he had a goddaughter, and I don't know that I feel comfortable giving her name, but he had a goddaughter that I believe he had seen from time to time, and I had met from time to time. A couple of times, I think, because she would, when I was in his home, in his dining room, she had come into the dining room.
Can I just be clear? So the exception was that's the only person who you saw as a minor female in his presence?
Correct.
Okay, just to be clear.
Who are the assistants that you're referencing?
Svetlana Pozadaeva. There was a woman by the name of there was another woman by the name of, trying to remember. If you have some names, I could tell you if I recall them or not.
And we'll have more specific questions.
Okay.
Did Mr. Epstein have children of his own?
To my knowledge, no.
Did Epstein or Maxwell ever ask if you wanted them to bring women or girls to you?
Never.
Did you ever have any sexual contact with young women or girls in the presence of Epstein or Maxwell?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever have sexual contact with any young woman or girl introduced to you by Epstein or Maxwell?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein receive a massage from a young woman or girl?
No.
Did you ever receive any massages from any young woman or girl brought to you by or introduced to you by Mr. Epstein or Miss Maxwell?
No.
We'll go off the record.
You can go on the record. Mr. Indyke, good morning.
Good morning.
I understand that Ms. Crockett has a statement.
Just briefly, as you go through your line of questioning,
Yes.
when you reference someone, if you say the assistant, if you say the partner, can you also make sure that you reference their name after you label their title for clarity of the record?
I'll try to remember that, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Indyke, I'm going to revisit some of the areas that you discussed with my majority colleagues in the previous round. In doing that, I don't want to make you repeat yourself. I just want to make sure that we have as clear a record as possible.
Okay.
So going back to the time when Mr. Epstein first hired you, did you have a title?
Attorney?
And if I understood your testimony correctly, you were the sole proprietor of an entity called Darren Indyke LLC. Is that right?
Darren K. Indyke.
Darren K.
LLC. And I don't think did I give that name? But that is.
Thank you. And If I also understand correctly, Jeffrey Epstein was the sole client of Darren K. Indyke PLLC. Is that right?
He was the primary client. From time to time, he was the primary client, and from time to time, I would do things for him and for his clients. But he was the primary client, and there were times when friends or acquaintances or somebody else would come. I wouldn't take on jobs very often because the expectation was that I would be available at all times, and that I would get projects for Epstein, and sometimes it's for Epstein's clients. I would get a project, and the expectation was as soon as that project came to me, that would be the most important thing I did, and I would get it done very quickly. So it wasn't, part of what I had to do was be available to make sure that I could respond to those things on that basis. And if I brought on more clients, that would interfere with that.
Are you familiar with an entity called J. Epstein and Co.?
Yes, I am familiar with that entity. I believe it's called J. Epstein and Company.
And were you associated with it in any way?
A long time ago, but I believe that's the entity that initially employed me.
And over what period of time did J. Epstein and Company employ you?
I don't remember the exact end date, but it was from 1996 for 3 or so years.
And was there another entity that employed you following J. Epstein and Company?
There was another entity called New York Strategy Group, which was primarily owned by Shantz,
I'm sorry.
by Jeffrey Shantz, the partner that brought me into. I believe I had a minority ownership of that LLC. It was an LLC.
And over what period of time were you employed through New York Strategy Group?
I believe that New York Strategy Group was my employer until, I want to say, 2006 or 7. And at some point, I became the primary owner of New York Strategy Group.
And when did Darren K. Indyke PLLC come into existence?
That came into existence, I believe, in 2008. Again, it was some time ago, but I believe it was in 2008.
So does J. Epstein and Company still exist?
No,
When was it wound down?
I believe J. Epstein and Company was wound down when Epstein moved his primary residence to the U.S. Virgin Islands and formed a company there. I don't remember the date exactly, but I think the company's name is Financial Trust Company, Inc. And J. Epstein and Company was discontinued at that point, I believe.
Did you have any association with Financial Trust Company, Inc.?
I believe I was at some point a corporate secretary, may have been a vice president in an administrative sense.
You were asked earlier about your communications with Jeffrey Epstein. Are you aware of Jeffrey Epstein ever using encrypted messaging software or an encrypted messaging app such as Signal?
As part of the things that I did for Epstein, once he became a registered sex offender, I had to report or include in a report to the New York Sex Offender Registry apps that he had used or that he had a presence on. I want to say that at some point, I remember Signal being used and maybe WhatsApp, though I can't tell you when.
At the time you started working for Jeffrey Epstein, what was his net worth to your knowledge? An approximate number is fine.
I don't know.
Did you come to know that later in time?
Well, I know it when he died because I'm the co-executor of the estate. I had to know it. There were times that I could recall over the, before I became executor, hearing net worths around, $500 million, sometimes less, sometimes 300 million. But, accounting for his assets and his wealth, that wasn't my role. So if I heard it in passing, not necessarily something that I would be kind of investigating or reporting.
And whose role was it to keep track of that?
The accounting department.
And specifically who?
I think Rich Kahn would do that. I think that was part of his role when he joined.
And over the period of time during which Mr. Epstein employed you, what, to your understanding, were the sources of his wealth?
Primarily, they were clients that he worked for and investments that he made. He did very well with investment funds. I'm not a financial markets kind of person. That wasn't my kind of skill set, but my understanding was the reputation that he had was that he was skilled with understanding financial markets, currencies, options, securities trading, but that his business wasn't as an investment advisor. His business was more as a financial consultant. But he did have participations in funds, and those funds yielded him pretty solid results. So between the funds and the clientele that he had that paid him fees over time, that's where his wealth came from my understanding.
If we could focus on the client servicing piece, how many clients did he have during the time that you worked for him?
I'm trying to, I can name them. I never actually thought about how many, but Les Wexner, clearly. When I first joined, he'd given me some kind of an assignment to do for David Rockefeller. I don't know if Rockefeller was a paying client. I wouldn't, that's not something I wasn't, again, that wasn't my role, but I did work for David Rockefeller. I believe Elizabeth Johnson. And I know there was work done for Mort Zuckerman. Leon Black. I know the Rothschilds. Trying to remember which of them or what entity, but I don't.
Would that be Ariana Rothschild?
I know the name Ariana Rothschild, and it's possible that it was for Ariana, but I'm not 100% certain.
Glenn Dubin?
So Glenn Dubin, I don't think Glenn Dubin was a client, like a client in the same sense that Wexner was a client. Dubin, as I understand it, had, there were a couple of different ways that he was connected with Dubin. Dubin had funds that he invested in, and that he made a good deal of money off these funds. I think Dubin, if I recall, he referred Jeffrey to invest in a fund called, I think it's DB Zwern. I don't remember the full name, but that's the fund name. And there was a dispute about DB Zwern that got fairly elevated. And as part of the resolution of that dispute, there was a settlement that came about. As part of the resolution of that dispute, because it was Dubin's referral to that fund, Dubin had some kind of compensation payment to Epstein to settle that case. And the last thing that I recall is Dubin had a company, I can't remember the name of the company right now as I'm sitting here, but that company was purchased by JP Morgan, I believe, and I believe Epstein got a finder's fee for that. And that was a one-off thing. It wasn't like, Epstein was kind of representing Dubin all the time or things like that.
What about Steven Sinofsky?
I know the name. I don't know, and I believe that there was a payment from Sinofsky. I just don't know. I don't know the nature of that relationship.
And just going down the roster,
Mm-hmm.
to the best of your recollection, how much did each of these people pay Epstein for the services he provided to them? And I'll start with Les Wexner.
I really don't know how much Wexner paid him. It was a lot. It was a lot, but I just don't know how much.
And what was the nature of the work that Epstein did for Les Wexner?
A variety of things. As I understood it, and his relationship with Wexner predates my arrival there, but as I understood it, sometimes people who obtain kind of this ultra high net worth standing get there gradually over time, and they kind of build their offices gradually over time. And when they do that, it becomes inefficient. There are people who are not necessarily doing things and are getting paid to do things, and there are people doubling up on things. And so part of the thing that Epstein did, at least for Wexner, that I can recall being told about, was kind of cleaning house a little bit. Also, he would do things for Wexner, like, for example, even, somebody at that level of wealth has lots and lots and lots of assets. And all of those things, art, jewelry, all of that stuff require insurance. But unless you're kind of born into it, you don't know how you're supposed to deal with that. And how you're supposed to deal with that is photograph it and appraise it so all of that's for record. God forbid something happens to it. You have good records to justify your insurance claim. So they helped organize it that way. Jeffrey did tax work, estate planning work.
Not to interrupt you, I'm receiving another request for you to speak up. I think
Oh, I'm sorry.
some of our audience
Sorry.
members are having difficulty
Apologize.
hearing you.
If I move this closer, would it help? Or not?
Let's try it.
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry, my voice is not.
I think it's for the people in the room, just a little.
Yeah, I don't know if
Right.
the mic's gonna.
So I apologize to everybody. So Epstein also did estate planning work, did tax planning, help people kind of achieve kind of better tax results, more tax efficient results for themselves. I don't know that too much of the detail behind this, but it was my understanding that with respect to Wexner, Epstein helped him gain greater liquidity with the wealth that he did have, because things like that help.
But that's a helpful picture, and I appreciate that.
Okay, so
And
that's Wexner.
moving down the list, and I think if we could just cabin the answers to the amount that each one of these people paid Epstein, to the extent you recall.
Sure.
The next name is Leon Black.
The way I know this is not because I kind of tracked it or reported on it, but it's based upon what I kind of read through the papers. So Leon Black, he did work for, I can confirm that. I heard reports that it was something like $158 million, and that wouldn't seem unreasonable to me.
And David Rockefeller,
I don't know.
Elizabeth Johnson,
I also don't know. She was a different lawyer by the name of Mandy Ellison was the lawyer that worked on her account.
and Mort Zuckerman,
I don't know how much money, if any, that he got from Mort.
and then the Rothschilds.
Also, I don't know.
Shifting back to the period in time when Epstein hired you,
Yes,
were you aware that he had an affinity for young women
no,
or for teenage girls?
no, absolutely not.
Did you become aware of that over time?
The only way I became aware of the allegation that he had an affinity for teenage girls was once I was kind of learned about the investigation in Palm Beach.
Did you become aware at any point that Epstein sexually abused young women and teenage girls?
I became aware of the allegation in Palm Beach that there were massages which at times ended up sexual, and that in some cases there were underage people in those massages. My understanding at the time was that he was unaware of their age. That my understanding is that the statements given by the people who gave police statements were that there wasn't force used, there wasn't coercion used. Those are the statements being made. I'm not testifying it to myself as to what I know, because I don't. But those are the statements: no force, no coercion, and that the conduct was voluntary. But again, I'm not commenting underage.
Okay.
I'm not making any comment about underage.
Can I just ask if you were asking if he was ever personally aware, or he's talking about allegations, but was your
Yes, but
question?
yeah, we veered off a bit. So yeah, and
Right.
I was focused on the personal knowledge.
So just to be clear.
I'm sorry, I have no personal knowledge of that.
We'll come back to that. During your employment, Mr. Khan, with Jeffrey Epstein, did you ever?
Mr. Indyke.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Indyke.
That's okay.
I beg your pardon. During your employment, Mr. Indyke, with Jeffrey Epstein, did you ever discuss with him his sexual activity with young women, whether consensual or otherwise?
No,
Did you ever discuss that topic with anyone else?
the topic generally, I'm sure, came up during legal conversations.
You were speaking during the previous round about Mr. Epstein's arrest in Florida. When did you learn about his arrest?
Again, the timing is a little bit cloudy to me. I don't believe I knew about it until 2006.
How did you become aware of it?
I believe, trying to remember back, I believe Epstein told me.
And did that conversation happen in person?
It was an in-person conversation. I want to say it was an in-person conversation. And I want to say it was in New York. I just don't remember where in New York.
And how long after the arrest did that conversation take place?
I don't know.
What did Mr. Epstein tell you during that conversation?
That he was charged, that he didn't really go into the details of the charges. This is more substance of it, because I don't remember the specific conversation. And then he told me that there were lawyers working on it with him and that I should work with them.
What was your reaction?
Surprised and shocked, to be honest.
Did you ask him for any additional details about the arrest or the nature of the charges?
I think I was so surprised that I didn't think to, and also my relationship with him wasn't so that I could get so deeply personal. And I had never been involved with anything like that before, so I didn't really know what to do.
Was the rest of Mr. Epstein's staff informed of the arrest at some point?
Yes, at some point. I don't remember when.
When, to your knowledge, was Mr. Khan informed of the arrest?
I don't know.
Did you ever discuss it with him?
In passing, but nothing in detail.
What was the conversation in passing?
Just, just the arrest. I think maybe when he lost banking privileges, must have been about the arrest. You know, nothing. Rich Khan and I did not get into detail about Jeffrey Epstein's arrest.
What did you discuss with respect to the loss of banking privileges?
Again, substance, not detail, that the banking privileges at Chase were lost. That, and again, I don't know if other than that the banking privileges lost, I don't know that I have enough detail to give you more than that.
Was it your understanding that the privileges at Chase were lost as a result of Mr. Epstein's arrest?
It was an assumption more than an understanding, because I don't know if anybody's experienced this, but when banks deny services to you, they don't, as a general rule, tell you why. They just say no.
But your assumption was that it was linked to the arrest as opposed to a different cause.
Yes. There was lots of publicity at the time, I think, that this happened, and so.
And I also understand from your testimony during the previous round that you ultimately represented Mr. Epstein along with other counsel in connection with his arrest and prosecution in Florida.
I was never the direct defense counsel, but I was brought on as a group of people that were.
So it would be fair to say that you were a member of his defense team.
Yes, very loosely, but yes.
So I think that anticipates my next question. Was there an allocation of responsibility among the members of the team? Did certain lawyers have responsibilities that differed from others?
You can't talk about how he allocated responsibility among the lawyers. There wasn't a group meeting like, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing.
Based on your observation.
My observation was that there was a group of lawyers at the time, all of whom kind of shared information and did things together. My role was kind of specific task oriented. Sometimes I would, if Epstein would ask me, did so-and-so do this yet? Could you ask them to do this, or ask them when they're going to do this? But I believe it was more like a group thing. Some people were better writers than others. Marty Weinberg was a very good writer. Jay Lefkowitz, also a very good writer. But I think as a rule, everybody kind of worked together.
And what, to your understanding, were the crimes that Jeffrey Epstein ultimately pled to?
My understanding was that there were two charges. One charge was a solicitation of prostitution, and the other charge was procuring prostitution of someone under the age of 18.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand from your testimony earlier that you were aware of the requirement that Jeffrey Epstein register as a sex offender in various states as a result of his plea. Is that right?
Yes, I became aware of that fact, yes.
And that included New York State.
Yes, there was an initial registration in New York.
And you were involved in the registration, is that right?
Yes, I believe I was involved in the registration.
And did you become aware in connection with that Jeffrey Epstein was designated a level 3 sex offender in New York State?
The answer to your question is yes. But that was after a whole a round of litigation.
The issue was litigated.
The issue was litigated, yes.
Okay, and were you part of the legal team that represented him in connection with that litigation?
Loosely.
And was it your understanding at the time that level 3 under New York state law meant that there had been a determination that Epstein posed a high risk of a repeat offense and a threat to public safety?
I understood it was a different designation, but I didn't understand that.
Broadly speaking, were you troubled by Mr. Epstein's guilty plea and incarceration in Florida?
Was I troubled? I was troubled. I guess the answer is yes. It was troubling. The problem I have in grasping and kind of tackling the question you have is not really knowing what it is. You know, it has come to, as it's come to pass. Clearly, he did something. But at the time, what I was struggling with is what it is that he actually did do. I think I went into previously I went into how the police reports were inconsistent with recorded statements, how there were references to items as sex toys, which weren't, were broken salad utensils. There was even a statement in from, I never heard the statement directly, but I was made aware of a statement made by the lead prosecutor in Florida, who was a female experienced sex crimes prosecutor that uttered a statement to the effect that there were no real victims there. Now, I'm not saying there weren't. I'm just saying that that's what I heard at the time. So I'm struggling with these things and not knowing what allegations are true or what allegations aren't true. And I know that with respect to his sex offense, the sex offender charge, which was required not by the state, it was required by the U.S. Attorney's Office after the state had kind of convened a grand jury. The grand jury came back with something that I don't remember the charge, but it wasn't that charge, and the consequence for that charge was mandatory PTI, which was much less than obviously the police chief wanted. And so what happened during the course of the federal investigation is the U.S. Attorney's Office wanted something more than that, and wanted him to plead to charges that would, one, put him in jail, and two, plead to charges that for which there would be a sex offender registration requirement. And the charge that they ultimately said you should go back to the state and make them charge you this was a charge that the defense team had been saying that they didn't have the factual predicate to actually have that charge, but that will do it because that's what you want to get this thing resolved. So the troubling part of it, it's hard for me to know for sure what actually happened, what was true, what was not true. A lot of the allegations turned out not to be true.
What about now? Do you have a belief as to whether girls and women were abused in Florida?
Well, again, after he after he was arrested the second time and then died, lots of people have come forward. Lots of them come forward who didn't come forward before, who said that they hadn't come forward. But since then, as the co-executive of the state, I've been made aware of many, many claims. And so with that number of claims being made, it's really hard to say that, no, he didn't do anything. Obviously, he did a lot of terrible things. So my view is, I don't know exactly what he did. And I'd say this again, because I want everybody to be clear about this. I didn't see it. I didn't see anything, and nobody complained to me about anything. So I don't know. But all these people came forward. So obviously there's something there. So your question is, what do I believe? No, I believe he did bad things.
At any point after you learned about Mr. Epstein's arrest in Florida, did you ever consider quitting your job?
With all of the discussion about how, the answer is, I don't think I did. I'm going back in time. I don't think I did. And the explanation for that is twofold. With all of the discussion about the defects in the investigation and statements from like the lead prosecutor and all this stuff and the lie detector test and all this and all of these other things, I think there was even a psychological evaluation that said he wasn't a pedophile. And so all of these conflicting reports came. It seemed to me, who was very inexperienced with this stuff, that maybe it wasn't what they were saying. And so
When taking into consideration all of that information, it sounds like you were weighing the question.
I'm quoting the question now. The question then was, I drank the Kool-Aid at the time. I think that's the answer, is I drank the Kool-Aid at the time.
So I think our members have some questions for you, Mr.
Okay.
Indyke.
Great.
Please.
Mr. Indyke, I have a couple questions. Just to follow up, do you personally believe that girls and women were abused by Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach?
I do believe that Epstein engaged in bad conduct with women, yes.
Do you believe that girls and women were abused,
I believe so, yes.
raped?
I don't know.
Okay. Let me get a couple questions. Mr. Indyke, I want to ask a few questions related to Jane Doe 4 from the case Doe versus Jeffrey Epstein out of the Southern District of New York. Now, Jane Doe 4 alleged that she met Epstein in South Carolina in the 1980s, and through him was introduced to President Trump, who we know the allegation was that he abused her when she was 13, and these are allegations made by Jane Doe 4. Are you aware of Jane Doe 4?
I'm aware of the Jane Doe, the case, Jane Doe.
You're aware of Jane Doe 4?
Aware of the case Jane Doe 4. I'm not aware of the
Do
person.
you know the identity of Jane Doe 4 in this case?
I don't.
So you do not know the identity of
So
Jane
sitting
Doe
here
4?
today, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Have you ever seen a document with the identity of Jane Doe 4?
I'm sure I must have.
So you have seen a document?
I'm sure I must have.
Okay. Now, last week, Mr. Khan, who's the co-executive of the estate, testified that Jane Doe 4 had received a settlement from the Epstein estate, of which you're a co-executor. Now, later in the deposition, when oversight staff attorneys asked about the settlement involving Jane Doe 4, Mr. Khan's attorney clarified on the record, according to his team, that Mr. Khan's earlier testimony had been mistaken and that neither he nor Mr. Khan recognized Jane Doe 4 as someone who had filed a claim against the Epstein estate. Now, since then, there's been additional back and forth and confusion about the details of Jane Doe 4 and her interactions with the estate. And there's been back and forth and clarification. So I just want for clarity, since you're a co-executor, now, Mr. Khan, and given your position as a co-executor of the estate for both, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate? So to be clear, as your position as a co-executor of the estate, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate?
So, Congressman Garcia, I have to say two things about anything with Jane Doe's. The first is we're bound by court orders not to say anything about the identity to the extent someone has sued under a Jane Doe name. We're not permitted by court orders to say who the person is at all. Secondly, putting aside whether it's someone as a Jane Doe or someone specifically identified, we are bound in confidentiality requirements in any settlement. We are, as the estate and the co-executors, to not identify if someone has settled or anything about the settlements. Having said that, any of those claimants who have settled, typically they are not bound by that. So, you're free to ask them if they want to identify things, but we cannot do that.
Good.
Aside from the identity and disclosing the identity to us of Jane Doe 4, any NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, as we have made clear in prior cases, Congress does not recognize. And we have the ability to determine whether we do and do not recognize. In this case, given that you were under subpoena, we would ask that you provide us information whether Jane Doe 4 received a settlement.
And let me continue.
Yeah, but let me just say to that quickly that putting aside whatever order may come out requiring them to disclose, I believe, but I'd have to look at each particular settlement agreement, we likely have notice provisions to the person settling. If we were bound to disclose it, to first notify that person, because they could probably seek court
To be
for
clear,
that.
you're not confirming or denying
we
that there was a
cannot.
settlement with Jane Doe 4. Is that correct?
We cannot.
So, Mr. Indyke, was there a settlement paid from the Epstein Victim Compensation Program to any Jane Doe or Jane Doe 4?
We have the same
Let me go-
confidentiality restrictions.
So you're not unwilling to answer if there was actually a payment from the Epstein Victim Compensation?
It's not a willingness issue, it's a bound by confidentiality
I'm not saying-
provisions.
well, look, I'm not going to take that premise, but I understand your position. Mr. Indyke, do you have any additional information on Jane Doe 4 that you can provide us?
No.
Okay, great. Mr. Indyke,
Yes.
the Epstein estate has provided documents and productions to this committee per subpoena, as you're aware, and we have welcomed those, of course, and we've gone through those, and we have continued to go through what's been provided. Not all the documents have still been provided to the committee. There's still some documents we believe that are in your possession. Is that correct?
In my possession
In
personally?
the possession of the estate,
I'm-
In response to the
in
subpoena,
response to the subpoena.
I think based on conversations that council has had with both minority and majority staff, we've complied with what everyone was
So
expecting.
it's-
If there's more that people were expecting that aren't, let us know.
Are there additional documents with the estate that have not been provided to the committee within the bounds of the subpoena?
Within the bounds of the subpoena, based upon response, my understanding from council is that whatever was agreed upon to be provided has been provided.
Okay, are there additional documents within that the estate has outside the dates of the subpoena, the subpoena was given, that are in possession of the estate?
I'm sorry, outside the date?
So there,
I
so
apologize, I'm not sure.
the subpoena obviously has dates of when to produce documents, period of time.
Mhm.
Are there documents in the possession of the estate outside the period of time within the subpoena that are in the possession of you and Mr. Khan as the co-executives of the estate?
I'm a little bit at a loss here because, what I did is, what I did and my
So you won't say,
co-executive.
so what you're saying is you won't answer the question if there's additional
No,
documents in
I'm
your possession?
He's trying to.
I'm trying to answer your question, sir. The estate essentially gave the documents to council. So I'm a little bit of a loss as to how to answer that question without conferring with council and council telling me what was it.
I think the question is pretty simple. The subpoena has a period of time where you should be producing documents within that period of time.
Specified document.
Right, specified.
We gave you all the documents that were specified.
Correct. So my question is, are there additional documents related to Jeffrey Epstein and communications outside the period of time specified in the subpoena that are in the possession of the Epstein estate
That you didn't ask
that
for.
we didn't ask for?
So the subpoena didn't say,
I
give
think
us
the que-
all the documents
Correct.
in
The
the
question's
state.
really clear. Are there additional documents outside the period of time specified in the subpoena that are in possession of the Epstein estate?
I assume so, yeah.
You assume so, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe next is,
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
My first question, during your employment by Jeffrey Epstein, did you ever become aware of a relationship between Epstein and Donald Trump?
The answer to that question is yes, aware of a relationship that existed before my time.
Okay, did you ever become aware of Donald Trump socializing with Epstein during your employment?
No. Again, my relationship with Epstein was not a social relationship like that. And I don't believe Donald Trump was ever in the office when we were there in New York. And I don't recall off the top of my head whether or not Epstein specifically met with him while I was employed as an attorney for Epstein.
And to confirm, you began your employment with Mr. Epstein in 1996?
1996, yes.
And you said before your time, so you're not aware of any relationship between the two men after 1996?
I am not personally aware of the relationship they had between the time that I was there, from the time that I was there going forward.
Do you believe they had a relationship?
What I recall is that at some point, whatever relationship did exist no longer existed. And I recall that it no longer existed because of some dispute relating to some property in Palm Beach. But I can't tell you what that relationship was from the time I was there going forward. because I don't know.
So you're saying you were not aware of Donald Trump socializing with Epstein. What about with any women connected to Epstein?
I believe that I had learned through a subsequent lawsuit that there was an allegation that President Trump and well, not President Trump at the time, but Donald Trump at the time had some kind of interaction with a person alleging abuse.
Some type of interaction?
I don't recall specific details of it.
When did you become aware of this allegation?
I believe that I received a copy of a lawsuit. So when that lawsuit was filed, then I became aware of it.
Do you have any sense of when that was, what year that
It was
was?
years ago. I really don't. It was years ago.
But you first said you believe that post 1996, Donald Trump and Epstein did not have a relationship, but at some point after that, you became aware of a lawsuit
Yes,
involving Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and an allegation made by them.
I believe the allegation in that lawsuit predated the time that I was working for Epstein, I believe. I mean, if somebody could show me the lawsuit, I could read it and see different.
The lawsuit was 2009.
The lawsuit was in 2009.
That's when Trump was deposed, and that's when Epstein was scheduled to be deposed.
Okay, do you recall the allegation,
Right.
the date of the allegation?
Have you ever, exactly, they are 90s. Have you ever discussed Donald Trump's connection to Epstein with anyone?
Other than privileged conversations that I've had.
Meaning with his lawyers, not, is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
During your employment by Epstein, did you ever become aware of Donald Trump visiting a property owned by Epstein, either in New York, New Mexico, Paris, Ireland?
No,
During your employment by Epstein, did you ever become aware of the relationship between Epstein and Howard Lutnick?
no, I didn't know that there was a relationship between Epstein and Howard Lutnick.
So you weren't aware that Mr. Lutnick was Epstein's next door neighbor in Manhattan?
Yes, but that I was aware that he was a neighbor in Manhattan, but I wasn't aware that they actually had a relationship.
Okay, I believe that's my time.
Congressman Inman?
Thank you. I'm going to hand you a copy of an exhibit A. And this is a consent order issued by the New York State Department of Financial Services regarding Deutsche Bank in July of 2020. I'd like you to turn to page 16, paragraph 48. And that reads, several of Mr. Epstein's employees or agents had authority to conduct transactions in the accounts on Mr. Epstein's behalf. One of them, Mr. Epstein's personal attorney, was active in withdrawing cash from Mr. Epstein. Attorney 1, on behalf of Mr. Epstein, made a total of 97 withdrawals from the bank's Park Avenue, New York City branch from 2013 to 2017 for personal accounts belonging to Mr. Epstein's. So my first question for you, Mr. Indyke, is Attorney 1 here listed, is that you?
I believe that's me, yes.
And can you explain why you were making these withdrawals?
At this time, there was a great deal of negative publicity about.
Was this done at the direction of Mr. Epstein? I guess I'll start there.
But, all right.
Well,
I would like him to answer the question, if the question is asked, I know, but he has an answer to a serious allegation.
No, I'm asking first, were these at the direction of Mr. Epstein?
Okay.
No, I do not believe that they were at the direction of Mr. Epstein.
Okay. Do you know what the cash was used for?
I don't have a specific knowledge of what the cash in each instance was used for, but I know generally, or believe generally, that when I made cash withdrawals, they were for things, for petty cash to supply the households, for supplies, for cleaning supplies, food.
You gave the cash to who then?
Just to be clear, I don't think he was done. That's okay. I just want the record to be clear that he had, I know, but you can't, but if he's not allowed to answer the questions, it doesn't matter.
Redirect him.
Okay, but just to be clear, he wasn't done. If you want to go on, that's fine.
I'm asking a follow-up question here, which was the cash, who actually received the cash?
The cash went to the accounting department.
Accounting department
yes.
of Mr. Epstein.
so there was an office down the hall from my office
Mhm.
where the accounting function for Mr. Epstein and his homes was performed. Somebody from the accounting office would ask me for to go to the bank to get money for the petty cash, and the petty cash would service the various households. There were 5 different households. And I would go to the bank with a check drawn on Mr. Epstein's account. The bank knew it was from Mr. Epstein's account. And I would get the cash and give it back to the accounting department.
This is a lot of cash, I just want to note, $7,500 per withdrawal. And that would be 97 withdrawals. That is, over the course of 16 months, a total of over $725,000 in cash.
Just to be clear, that paragraph says it's 4 years, not 16 months.
60.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard. Thank you.
4 years or so, 16 months.
Mhm.
That's a lot of cash, $725,000.
It's a large amount of cash. I
As a
agree.
lawyer, did that not concern you or raise any red flags?
Well, if you knew that Mr. Epstein had 5 multi-million-dollar residences, or 6 actually with the other island, had dozens of staff members, didn't have use of credit cards, all of those residences had lots of rooms, lots of people working there that needed food, that needed supplies, that needed equipment, that needed tools.
To your knowledge, was any of that, and I'm only saying this, sir, because I'm running out of time, was any of that money used to give cash payments to women or young girls?
I just want the record to be clear that he had not finished his prior answer, but go ahead.
So I did not believe that any amount of cash that I gave to the accounting department was going to be used for an improper purpose. I believed that there were legitimate reasons to bring that cash in, and I did so.
Now, I want to switch topics here. Did you have any kind of written representation agreement with Mr. Epstein for the scope of your services as an attorney, a retainer agreement, anything like that?
I believe at some point I did.
Now, that's not available in the files that were produced to us. Is that
I
something
don't know that I actually have it anymore.
you don't have anymore? Okay. What were the terms of your scope of representation and also your payment agreement with Mr. Epstein?
The payment was decided on an annual basis. It wasn't decided.
Not upfront, not based on hour?
No.
Just whatever he decided to pay you, that's what you received?
The answer is yes, but he had always been generous with me, so I didn't have any reason to doubt it.
He was very generous with you. So from 2003 to 2013, according to public reports, your personal bank account received more than $2.4 million from Epstein, while your business account received over $8.3 million. You also received a loan that was never repaid of $7 million, and a copy of Mr. Epstein's trust showed that he planned to leave you $50 million, 50, which was matched only by his girlfriend, Karina Chuliak. What were you doing for him that made him so generous to you?
I think I've already discussed all of the things that I did for Mr. Epstein, which were all legitimate legal tasks. I was working for him at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. I was on call 24 hours a day with him. And I was not at liberty to take on other clients in a way that other lawyers in private practice would want to take on clients to continue their business.
At the end of my time, that's a lot of money. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Stanbury.
Hi.
So I represent Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Zoro Ranch is just north of my congressional district. And as you're probably aware, New Mexico has opened a truth commission and reopened the criminal investigations into what happened at the ranch. So my questions are primarily fact-finding, less so much about your specific role, but really about the ranch and the investigations and why DOJ asked the state to drop their case. I also have a follow-up question about Trump as well as your work on the defense team. So that's kind of the scope of what I want to ask about. So as I understand it, you helped to manage the assets at Zoro Ranch, is that correct?
I wouldn't say I helped to manage the assets.
Were you involved in
You mean
any,
now as co-executor or back then?
back then, were you involved in any legal or financial matters over the course of your employment with Jeffrey Epstein and Zoro Ranch?
I was,
You
yes.
were. Did you ever travel there?
I've traveled to the ranch, I want to say 2 or 3 times.
And are you aware that there are multiple allegations that were taken by the FBI of sexual abuse at the ranch?
I have been made aware of those allegations, yes.
Were you involved in any way, legal or financial, in the defense of Mr. Epstein, either in a state case or a federal case at the ranch?
No.
You-
Well, a civil case?
You were involved in a civil
In
case?
a civil case, and I believe there was a case relating to there was a grazing lease that was taken away.
But in any of the sexual abuse cases?
No.
Do you have any personal knowledge and or can you share with us why DOJ asked the state of New Mexico to drop its investigation into sexual abuse?
I have no personal knowledge of that.
Okay. I want to move on to a follow-up question on Trump and this suit that was filed by a young woman against both Trump and Epstein for abuse at her house. As I understand it, looking at both the responsive documents that the estate sent us, as well as separately the DOJ's files, it appears to me that these are two separate cases. Is that true?
Could you repeat the question?
So it appears to me that the Jane Doe 4 FBI files that the federal government is tracking, in which a young woman was interviewed 4 times by the FBI for abuse at Jeffrey Epstein's New York estate, is a separate case from the lawsuit that was filed in 2009 against Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. Is that true?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. Did you help to process the files from the estate that were sent to the committee?
The answer to your question is I did.
Yes. Okay, so you're aware that in the files there's...
No, that I did not.
You did not. Who
So
processed?
the files, all of the files from the estate went over to the lawyers with instructions to comply with all lawful requests.
So it was handled by an outside firm rather than you?
Was handled by the law firm.
Okay, did you review the documents?
Not the volume of documents that reviewed.
But you are aware, as was just established, that there was a lawsuit in 2009, and there's documentation in the files that were transmitted from the estate that actually state that Epstein was scheduled for a deposition in that case, correct?
I am aware, certainly aware
Yeah.
now.
I
I was
documents
aware generally of the case.
Yeah.
I think I was aware at some point that there was a request for a
Was
deposition.
Jeffrey Epstein actually deposed? These are scheduling documents that came from the estate. Was he deposed in that
I
case?
don't believe he was, no.
Do you know why?
I don't know.
Okay, so that goes to my final set of questions, which is, did you personally or anyone that you worked with make any payments or financial transfers to any lawyers, law enforcement officers, DOJ, or state attorneys involved in cases against Jeffrey Epstein for sexual abuse?
Say that one more time, because that's a lot to unpack. So,
I think just to be clear, because you asked lawyers, so do you mean lawyers for some government in that question?
Yeah.
Okay, that's,
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
ask it slightly slower because we are on a time
I
constraint here.
apologize.
But really what I'm trying to establish, if I may have a moment to establish it, because it's an important piece of the question here, that we're trying to get to the bottom of. The overall point here is, why did DOJ and state entities not prosecute these crimes in a more timely manner? And it has been alleged by survivors that they received some sort of payment, maybe there were transfers of money involved. And so let me ask specifics. Did Alex Acosta,
Okay.
as the U.S. Attorney for the Department of Justice, ever receive any money from Jeffrey Epstein, his estate, or any of his business entities?
My knowledge, no.
To your personal knowledge, you're saying no, but is it possible that he did?
I don't know.
Did any other law enforcement agents, that to your knowledge?
I don't believe so, but I don't know.
But you don't know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Walkinshaw?
Thank you, Mr. Indyke. I want to go back to compensation. So
Yeah.
when you started working for Mr. Epstein, what was your compensation? It was an annual salary, you remember roughly the amounts? Or was it hourly?
No, when I started, it was around, I want to say 450, 400 or so.
$450,000
Yes.
a year,
Yes.
okay? And did you, in addition to that, receive any kind of bonus compensation or incentive structure?
I don't recall on a year-to-year basis. When I went back to think about it, what I remember at the beginning was about $450,000.
Okay. And that salary, I presume, increased over time over the course of 23 years.
It did.
And from the time that you were hired until Epstein's death, could you tell us roughly ballpark how much you were paid?
Total ballpark between 27 to 30 million dollars for 23 years. Roughly comes out to about $1.2 million a year. So,
And there's been reference already to one loan you received from Mr. Epstein.
it was a series of loans, but not one.
How many?
It total, I think, 77 million. I believe that's
7 million. And what was the purpose of the loans? Why did you need the loans? Why did he give you the loans?
ultimately the idea was that I was going to do investing on my own.
Did you end up doing
I
investing?
invested in one thing.
What did you do with the rest of the $7 million?
I wound up using it.
You spent it.
I spent it, yes.
Okay. And can you give us roughly the years that you received these loans?
2013 to 2018.
So $7 million in 5 years, you made some minimal investment and you spent the rest. I mean, what did you spend it on?
I support a lot of people in my household. I support both mothers, all of their health expenses. I support my sister-in-law who's got a granddaughter that she also takes care of. I support her as well.
You needed the money. You needed all of it.
I use the money.
And how many of these loans, or how much of the total loan amount, was ultimately forgiven by Mr. Epstein?
Before we get there, you should know that I've been paying interest all the way through until the time that he died.
Okay.
Interest on these.
That's actually one of my next questions. So why don't you?
So, and the answer to your question is that according to the estate plan, all of the loans are to be forgiven.
Upon his death, or when the estate is?
Well, right now it's up in the air because there has to be enough money in the estate to cover it.
Did Epstein ever pay you for anything beyond the legal services you've described here today?
No, he never did.
Did he give you anything else of value? Gifts, real estate? We already talked about the IVF. Anything else?
He helped me purchase a house the first time that money was paid back. The second time, he helped me purchase a home by putting by purchasing my home in New Jersey, going to contract for the home in New Jersey.
Did he ever make any payments directly to your wife or other family members?
As part of the discussion that we were just having, yes.
As part of this
As part of this money.
$7 million.
Yeah.
Some of that $7 million went directly to your wife. Family?
The house, for the house.
For the house. Okay. And you were asked earlier, shared the IVF treatment funding.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
That definitely did that.
I don't think you gave an amount roughly in terms of what he paid for the IVF treatment.
It was 5 times. I recall that at the time, the treatments, the medical portion of the treatments was something like $10,000. And there was also the hormones that required to be purchased as well. I don't remember what they cost.
Okay, so 10,000 times 5 is what you can remember.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
We're gonna, our time here is done, but I have just one thing just to put into the record and just want to just be clear.
Yes.
It's our committee's opinion and understanding that within the subpoena that the Epstein estate has to actually provide us documents, there are actually 2 sections, section 15 and section 16, where we have not received those documents. Now, the majority may have directly dismissed those sections with all of you directly. We understand that perhaps the majority feels that the estate has been fully responsive to the subpoena, but it's our understanding that we are still waiting for sections 15 and 16 in the subpoena, and the minority still wants access to those documents. We believe that they're important. So I want to make sure I say that for the record, that we don't believe the subpoena it's actually been fully complied with yet. Thank you.
I suggest, Congressman, that you talk to the majority because they know the answer to the question. We are awaiting instruction from the majority on those two sections. We are prepared to respond to them fully. We have responded fully to every request from the majority and the minority. We are awaiting instruction from the majority, which has been promised to us and not yet delivered.
Okay. Well, we look forward to the majority providing their response. We get those final sets of documents. Thank you.
We'll go for it.
We will go back on the record. Chairman Comer.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. You had mentioned earlier you, in your legal capacity, helped work some deals on stock transactions. Do you know anything about how he determined his investment strategy? Maybe not necessarily just with stocks, but with real estate. Did he just come to you, or did he, or in conversations, did he say how he decided to purchase this property in Europe or this property in the United States? I mean, it's strange to me that a guy that went from being a substitute teacher to advising the richest and most powerful people in the world on their finances and taxes. Do you know of or recall any conversations he had about how he determined which investments he would make?
No, Jeffrey Epstein was somebody who made all of the decisions he made on his own he would consult individual people. Like for his attorneys, he polled pretty much every time he had an issue, all the issues that were working on a project, he would ask them questions, specific questions that he wanted answers to, but then he would go out and make his own decisions. He never discussed strategies. In fact, that was decidedly not something that he ever wanted to hear from me about. And not something he ever discussed with me. I would take direction after decisions were made, after conversations he had with his clients, directly with his clients. I would take direction after that fact and not be part of their kind of thought processes to get there. So the answer to your question is no.
Okay. So you had mentioned he consulted with other people. Do you know which other people he consulted with? Did he ever say, Bill Gates told me to buy Microsoft, it's fixing to split, or anything like that?
This is over a long period of time, and there's not a conversation that I would say stood out in my mind where that's where he got the information for something. Most people who interacted with him, it's my impression that they thought he was very, very smart.
Right.
They thought he knew a lot of stuff, that he was very knowledgeable about tax law, fairly knowledgeable about estate planning, and people, and about currencies, and people went to him for advice.
Did he just pick that up on his own? I mean, he obviously didn't study it in school.
I don't know.
You don't know?
But I know that he worked at Bear Stearns for a period of time. And did, as I understand it, because it's all kind of anecdotal to me, learned option trading or became very, very successful at option trading there at a time when option trading wasn't such a well-known thing.
Right.
So he had a head for this stuff.
Okay.
At least that's the understanding that I have. And I don't
It's
think
pretty sophisticated, and you're on a time clock there. Like Miss Pelosi's the most recent offender, in my opinion, of stock trading. That's a big issue in Congress. And Pelosi does stock options, and most people in Congress don't know what stock options are. But the concern about members of Congress, or I would include Epstein, trading options is you almost have to have a great deal of confidence that that stock's going to move in one direction or the other very soon. And that's where a lot of, obviously, insiders trade naked options and things like that. You don't ever recall Epstein saying, I'm purchasing this stock option because I know it's fixing to crash in a week.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's not the thing. That's not something he would ever discuss with me.
You had mentioned you set up a bunch of the LLCs, and I understand what you're saying to protect liability and things like that. Did he ever say why he needed to have so many LLCs to protect for liability?
I don't think one, the answer to your question is no, there was never a conversation, I need LLCs to protect liability. It was for the clients that he had, for example, like Wexner had a bunch of LLCs and a bunch of corporations set up. And it was just considered that's what you do. If you have a new business, you set up a company for it. If you have a new asset like a plane, you set up a company for it. Never appeared to me to be anything other than a legitimate reason to set up an entity. And for somebody who has a lot of money and a lot of assets and a lot of business ventures, if you're setting up separate entities for each, there's just going to be a lot of them. It was never meant to be a kind of a veil. And the truth of the matter is that anybody who interacted with any of these entities always knew that it was him that they were interacting with, or at least my understanding was, to my recollection, they knew that they were interacting with him as the beneficial owner of the entity. The banks did, certainly after 9/11, the banks definitely knew that it was him.
How many LLCs would you estimate Epstein had?
I don't think I could tell you. How
More
many
than
there were.
50?
Maybe, I don't know.
Some people would suspect he had a lot of LLCs. Every property was a different LLC to protect himself from liability. And this is a guy that now we know, and you say you didn't know at the time, but was, potentially abusing women, maybe underage women, and obviously that would be an obvious reason to form a LLC on each separate property.
I could respond to that if you like. I don't think that really works.
Okay.
Because it's a personal tort. If he engages in a personal tort for which he is civilly liable, it doesn't matter which entity that owned the property that it happened on, you're going to go after him for engaging in the personal tort.
Okay. Bill back.
Just a couple of questions. He pled guilty in 2007 and received an 18-month sentence. You wrote a letter for his plea for a new sentence, but you wrote a part of the letter. Who were his attorneys that represented him during that time?
It's a while ago, and I gave you a list, and I'll list them again.
Did you know them? Did you recommend them, or did
No, they were in place, and newly ones came into place.
Did they predate you? You've obviously been there for close to 20 years at that time.
No, but I don't know that they predated me. I don't know. I know that they were there.
At that time, you said that there were 3 lawyers and there were 2 lawyers, and then you were one lawyer.
Yeah.
In 2007, was it just you, or were there 2 or 3?
2007, I think it was just. I think Jeff Shanson was no longer associated with him, so it was just me, and I think the other attorney that was handling it.
Were you involved in whatever the situation you had that allowed him to leave jail 6 days a week for 12 hours a day?
That would have been his defense team, Jack
That's pretty impressive. I mean, not a lot of people get to go to jail for 18 months, only serve 13, and get out 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
So my understanding, and again, this is not something I do.
Sure.
But my understanding at the
You're a
time.
lawyer, though. That's not normal.
Yes, but criminal defense versus transactional work on a stock purchase agreement are different things.
But wait, you were going to explain. So.
I am going to explain.
All right.
My understanding from the defense lawyers was that they were asking, and they said it. I said it in response to, I think, claims even by the assistant U.S. attorney that this was not appropriate. And my understanding from the defense lawyers is they requested and received only that which any other similarly situated person in jail would be entitled to at the time. That was my understanding. And that's
Palm Beach County had a very interesting system for work release. Okay. That's just something that I think the American people are like, that's kind of strange. But moving on, this morning there was a CBS News article that published that I'll read it. Indyke and Khan recently settled a lawsuit accusing them of facilitating sham marriages in which foreign-born victims married Americans whom Epstein abused for immigration purposes. Can you tell us anything about the settlement? Who was it with?
This settlement was in this, it was just a putative class action lawsuit that, and the settlement was by the estate as well as us. It was upwards of $35 million to be paid to those who were abused by Mr. Epstein.
How many plaintiffs were there? Can you tell us that?
How many?
How many plaintiffs?
There was one initially. That plaintiff was dismissed out of the case. Another plaintiff came on, and then the second plaintiff after that came on.
Is this settlement public or is it private?
It's, I mean, I believe that they filed a notice of the settlement in the court, and I think the documents.
What were the allegations underlying the?
Can I just make one thing
Yes.
clear? Because he about the number of plaintiffs. So that's the named plaintiffs, but it's a class action. So it's supposedly on behalf of some unknown number.
Right, and that class hasn't been certified.
What were the allegations underlying the claim?
I would refer you to the document itself, but
Okay.
in substance, it seemed to me that what was being said was that in providing accounting services and in providing legal services that we did for Mr. Epstein, that we facilitated his conduct of a sex trafficking enterprise.
So it seems that there were foreign-born women that their visa was going to expire and they were going to have to leave, or they were going to be overstaying their visa. And the scheme was to get the woman to marry an American. And, I mean, I guess there's a lot of documentation associated with that, and the allegation is that you and Khan facilitated the underlying documents for that. Is that what the allegations were?
I don't think that's accurate. And again, I tell you to go please read the complaint to see what they were. And again, I can tell you that I never arranged, I never facilitated. I didn't even know about the marriage.
What's your
until
relationship
they
with OSA Properties?
What's that?
What's your relationship with OSA Properties?
I don't have a direct relationship with OSA. I don't have any relationship with OSA.
Did you ever do any legal work associated with OSA Properties? For example, creating leases for individuals that were living there?
I obtained a lease from OSA Properties.
So you were a tenant of 301 East 66th Street?
At one point, I was a tenant, yes.
Okay. I'll ask the rest of my questions later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Indyke,
Yes.
we appreciate your patience. We're gonna be jumping around. Obviously, we have the minority and majority asking questions, and we would like to avoid repeat questions. But I want to follow up first on Chairman Comer's questions as it related to the LLC. From your testimony, it sounds like a lot of the time when Mr. Epstein would solicit opinions, would it be fair to say he already had his mind up of how he would want to proceed, whether it was a particular transaction or the creation of an entity?
I don't know that that's true or not true, and I think it would depend on each circumstance.
Did Mr. Epstein ever create LLCs or any other entities himself and then later inform you?
I have no recollection of him ever doing so.
Can I ask a quick question? Did you ever create LLCs for people that were employees of Epstein?
Did I ever create an LLC for people that were employees of Epstein? There was an LLC called Lynn and Jojo LLC. That was an LLC that acquired a home that Lynn and Jojo, who were staff members of his, resided in. I believe I had something to do with the creation of, I don't know if I actually did it or if there was a corporate service company that did it, but I believe I had something to do with creating the entity that owned that house.
Is that the only LLC that was created?
I think if that's an LLC, I I think HBRK was an LLC that for Rich Collin.
It seems the post-2009 scheme was to entrap women and create a complicated financial, legal, emotional web that they couldn't get out of. And there's allegations that you created LLCs for some of those women, which then, have you ever operated someone's LLC without their knowledge?
Well, can I address this idea of this scheme? I know nothing about a scheme. It was never, if I was asked to form an LLC, I formed an LLC. And if I was asked to form an LLC, I would have been told, like in the case of when JoJo LLC, this is for the purchase of a house. And I would have been told this is for the purchase of a house. Now,
would it surprise you to know that Epstein was operating LLCs for people that he ostensibly employed without their knowledge?
yes, that would surprise me.
And it would, you agree that it would be illegal to do things like file taxes and operate that LLC without the individual's knowledge? And if that person then asked for information surrounding that, withholding that would also be problematic.
I wouldn't want to express an opinion on something like that unless I actually saw what you're talking about.
During our previous hour, we talked about whether Epstein may have been tipped off to a search warrant at his residence. You had said that you did not know. Is that a fair characterization of your testimony?
That's a fair characterization of my testimony.
Do you think he was tipped off?
I really don't know.
Did you understand Mr. Epstein to have close relationships with government officials in Southern Florida?
No.
Did Jeffrey Epstein ever inform or represent to you that he was working with any intelligence service of any nation, including the United States?
No.
Did Ghislaine Maxwell ever inform or represent to you that she was working with any intelligence service of any nation, including the United States?
No.
During your relationship, did you ever suspect Epstein or Maxwell of being affiliated with any intelligence agency?
I never suspected either of them. No.
At any time, have you had any affiliation with any intelligence agency?
No.
You've never.
Did you, Barack, live at 301 East 66th Street while you were there?
I recall, though I'm not 100% certain, but I recall that Ehud Barak may have stayed at an apartment in 301 East 66th Street. There were several apartments there that guests would come into town, people that he knew, that he would make available for people to stay at for a short period of time. It is possible, and I'm not 100% certain, that Ehud Barak did in fact stay at the apartment at one time or another.
Would it surprise you to know that property records show that Ehud Barak's wife lives there from 2019 to today?
It would surprise me, yes.
Okay.
And just because Ehud Barak was brought up, did you have any relationship with that individual?
I believe that on one of those occasions when I was visiting Epstein, not one, I think two, maybe three, but a limited number of occasions when I was doing work at Epstein, when I was going over status or going over an assignment with him in his dining room on the ground floor of his townhouse. Barak had come to the townhouse, or was just leaving, and I believe I said hello, or I was introduced once, maybe, or twice.
What was your understanding of Mr. Barak's relationship with Mr. Epstein?
I didn't really have an understanding of their relationship. I knew that there was a relationship, but I didn't really have an understanding about what it was.
Did you ever have any understanding that Mr. Ehud Barak had ties to intelligence?
From what, as a general matter, what one reads in the news, I thought as a former prime minister of Israel, probably. I didn't know more than that.
And outside of Mr. Ehud Barak, is there anyone that you know of affiliated with Mr. Epstein or Maxwell that you suspected to have ties to intelligence?
None, no, the answer is no.
And again, for the record, you have never had any relationship with any intelligence service.
I have not, no.
You have never visited CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia?
No.
During the previous hour, the minority asked you questions related to your role as Mr. Epstein's attorney. I believe that they discussed at length the compensation structure. I just want to focus on your hiring, and again, recognizing I'll probably make you repeat yourself.
It's okay.
Is our understanding that you were working with this partner on Mr. Epstein's accounts, and subsequent to that, you and that partner went to J. Epstein and Company? Is that a fair characterization?
No, it didn't happen that way.
Okay.
I worked first as a paralegal, then as a clerk, and then as an associate at a law firm by the name of Golden Wachtel, at which that partner was a partner by the time he left. He left Golden Wachtel before I left Golden Wachtel. After he left Golden Wachtel, I then went to Greenberg Traurig for about a year or so. And when I was at Greenberg Traurig for about a year, I received a call from that partner to consider come working for him, with him, for representing Mr. Epstein.
And initially, what was your compensation for Mr. Epstein, with Mr. Epstein?
It's a long time ago, but I believe it was around 450,000.
What were you making at the law firm prior to moving to working with Mr.
A
Epstein?
little bit less than that, but probably in the 300s. I don't, it's a guess. I don't recall 100%, but it was less.
How were you compensated by Mr. Epstein?
Well, it depended. If I was working as an employee, like I was for J. Epstein and Company, then I was compensated directly by the company J. Epstein and Company. When I was working for the company New York Strategy Group, New York Strategy Group would get paid by Epstein, and then New York Strategy Group would pay me whatever it paid me at the time. And when I was working with my own law firm, I received funds directly from Epstein, or Epstein, or it could have been one of his entities, like Southern Trust Company.
And you mentioned previously that you started around 450,000 a year.
Yeah.
What was your compensation by the time that you finished representing Mr. Epstein during his life?
My last compensation that I received for him before he died was, or maybe it was just after he died, it was pursuant to an employment agreement that he signed, was the payment was $200 million. I'm sorry, $2 million, not $200 million. $2 million, sorry.
Did you find